Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtedar, your host, and today I'm once again going to talk to you about the developments in the Middle East, with particular focus on Saudi Arabia and its foreign policy. Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State for the United States, many parts of the world, this position is described as Foreign Affairs Minister or External Affairs Minister, as in India. So Antony Blinken has had a meeting with the Saudi foreign minister and is now on his way to meet with the Prime Minister of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu. And the point is essentially this, that the Saudis want a treaty with the US, a security treaty with the US. And in pursuit of that treaty, they are willing to make some concessions to Israel, and they are demanding some concessions from both the US as well as from Israel. So today I'm going to talk about this. I think once again, Saudi Arabia is basically going back to a pre-October 7 circumstances and is actually abandoning, in my opinion, the Palestinian cause and the quest for the Palestinian state. So, but before I do that, please subscribe to Khanversations, like this video, and don't forget to share it with your socio-political network. So this is what happened. After October 7th, the Saudis basically said, we're going to put a pause on the expansion of the Abrahamic Accords. They said very clearly that they would not be able to move forward with normalization of relations with Israel unless there were concrete steps taken towards establishment of a Palestinian state. So basically, the consequences of October 7, this terrible attack by Hamas on Israeli civilians, and then subsequent brutal response of Israel, which has now killed over 27,000 people in Gaza and displaced close to 1.8 million people. 1,200 people died in Israel. So the Saudis said that the circumstances have been changed in the Middle East. There is a lot of anger in the Middle East. There's a lot of focus once again on the Palestinian issue and the expansion of settlements in the West Bank. So it would not be safe or prudent for them to move ahead with the Abrahamic Accords. So they would love to normalize relations with Israel, but for that, they had several conditions. So there are two essentially primary conditions that Saudi Arabia has been touting for the last 1 year. One is that they want security guarantees from the US and no presidential executive order like Obama's JCPOA with Iran, which just crumbled when the next president came in. They want a NATO-like treaty where if anybody attacks Saudi Arabia, then the US is committed to serious defense, not like Ukraine, not sending weapons, not sending money, but actually coming and fighting for Saudi Arabia as they did in Gulf War when Kuwait invaded, when Iraq invaded Kuwait and threatened Saudi Arabia, the way Americans came to the aid of the Gulf nations. That is exactly what they want. If anybody, especially Iran, threatens Saudi Arabia militarily, the US is there to stand as a guard protecting Saudi Arabia. That's not all. They want a NATO-like treaty, number one, from the US. Number two, they want the US to sell them advanced weapons. And there is a whole list of advanced weapons that they want to modernize their army. And the third thing that they want is a peaceful nuclear program. So the US should establish a peaceful nuclear response. So Saudi Arabia can use nuclear energy while it continues to export oil to the rest of the world. So these are the three conditions that it has imposed on the US, and what it wants from Israel is basically concrete steps moving forward to establish a Palestinian state. But the latest change and development that has taken place as a result of this meeting yesterday is that now the Saudis are saying, well, we don't really want you to take concrete steps forward. We just want you to make declaratory statements, which means that Netanyahu should basically say, oh, sometime in the future, we will establish a Palestinian state, or we are committed to establishing a Palestinian state, or we recognize that Palestinians must have a state or need to have a state. And so there will be, at some point in time, a two-state solution implemented, and the Palestinians will get a state for themselves. So they want some kind of declaratory statements without any concrete action. So basically, they're telling the Israelis that, look, our population, most of the Arab population and the Saudi population, they're all very stupid people. So just say that we will establish a state, as America and Israel have been doing for the last 20, 25 years, since actually 1994, that the two-state solution has been on the table. Now just recommit orally to this two-state solution, and I can tell my people that, look, in exchange for this particular normalization with Israel, I have now got a statement from Netanyahu saying that there will be a Palestinian state very soon or sometime in the future. And to me, this is a complete abandonment, once again, of the Palestinians and the Palestinian cause by the Saudis. But what is also interesting in all of this is the Prime Minister of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, has twice, not once, but twice last week reiterated and said there is going to be no Palestinian state, and that he's going to have complete security control on the on the west side of the river. So there is going to be no two-state solution as far as the Israeli Prime Minister is concerned. But the Americans continue to talk about it, and the Saudis basically want the Americans to talk about it, or at least the Israelis to talk about it, so that they can move forward. Now, the Saudis are not really keen on normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia. I don't know what it does. For the Israelis, it's very important because it completely legitimizes the Israeli state. And if the Saudis embrace them, so will the rest of the Arab world. It will also give an excuse for other countries who are a bit hesitant to go ahead and normalize relations. Normalization of relations with Israel may get you some technology to spy on your own people and some intelligence, but beyond that, it's nothing great. Israel depends so much on the US, but what it does is puts them on the good books of the US, and so they hope to get lots of goodies from the US by making Israel happy. So the Saudis, really what they want is the American security guarantee to protect them from Iran. And to do that, the Americans are saying, well, we will do that, but first you should normalize your relations with Israel. So the main interest of the Saudis is to have a NATO-like treaty with the US. So all this talk of the new role of China in the Middle East, partnership with Russia, is just hot air. What the Saudis are dreaming of is to have a NATO of their own with the US committing to protect them in case of Iran. So that is where we are at this moment. The Arab countries feel very insecure. They feel insecure in their own region from their own neighbors. And they are hoping that the US, which is determined to withdraw from the Middle East, stays in the Middle East and commits to their security. Now, why does the US want to do this? This is a critical question. There is absolutely no interest for the US to go and protect Saudi Arabia. In the case of Iran, they should basically say, look, I mean, we are moving away from fossil fuels. The Saudis are diversifying themselves in their trade. It's not the biggest trading partner. So there's not any compelling reasons for the Americans to rush to defend the Saudis if they get into a military conflict with some other country, with the Yemen Houthis. So what kind of a treaty are we going to get? Is the US going to protect Saudis only from Iran or any potential proxy or any other country that comes under Iranian influence like Iraq? I don't know, but if the Saudis are smart, they would want a comprehensive treaty. The Saudis are protected from anybody who attacks them, even if they are from outside space. And this is airtight, signed and ratified by the US Senate. And that's why they are in a rush. They want this before the election cycle begins, because they're not sure whether if there's going to be a Republican president, then a Democratic Senate will not sign any treaty that may not sign any treaty that the American president commits the US to. So this is an interesting thing, that the US is committing to go to war to protect Saudi Arabia for only one reason, so that Israeli interests are advanced. Israel becomes a normal country in the Middle East. Israel is embraced in the Middle East. Israel has a normalized relation with the Saudis. So for this particular interest, sometimes I wonder whether the U.S. Secretary of State is trying to advance U.S. interests or Israeli interests. I have yet to see what, other than making Israel safe, making Israel prosper, other than that, what other reasons are there for the US to commit itself to doing for Saudi Arabia what it has not done for Ukraine? We have spent close to $150 billion now, and we want to spend more in protecting Ukraine from Russia. But what the US has not done is put troops on the ground, and the US has not fought for Ukraine. But we are going to do that for the Saudis for what? So that they become pally with the Israelis. So Israeli interests apparently are paramount for this particular administration. And we need to have a serious debate of this. I hope the Senate has some hearings with regards to that. Senator Ben Cardin, who's a very pro-Israel senator, put a hold on weapons sale to India because of one attempted so-called assassination in the US by some India-connected person, the Pannu Gate. Gurpreet want Panno's attempted assassination, which was prevented by the FBI. So for that, Ben Cardin put a hold on sale of critical weapons to India. But for Israel, they want to go and fight a war for Saudi Arabia, want to open the door to nuclear technology for Saudi Arabia, sell them advanced technology, because there's no discussion about what the US will give to the Saudis. The only issue seems to be whether Netanyahu will accept this deal. Some empty words about Palestinian state in exchange for normalization with the Saudis. So has Anthony Blinken or Joe Biden already told the Saudis, we will give you what you want from us. All we are waiting now is for the Saudis, for the Israelis to say yes. This is very problematic. I hope that people in the United States will ask some serious questions of this administration. Have you just committed to a war against anybody who attacks Saudi Arabia so that Israel is recognized by Saudi Arabia? Nobody's asking this question. I wonder why. I mean, this discussion of Saudi-Israeli normalization is going on for the last 6-7 months. Anyway, why are the Saudis going for this deal? It's a good deal for them. They have, anyway, de facto, they've been cooperating with the Israelis. Now they will do it in public, but they are getting a lot of goodies from the US. So this is essentially a bad deal for the US, good for Israel, good for Saudis. But why is the Saudis doing it? It's because of Iran's foreign policy, Iran's proxies that continues to threaten the Saudis. In fact, these two countries, both China and Iran, need to rethink their foreign policy. They are threatening regional states and pushing them into the ambit of the United States and pushing them into alliances with the US because of their aggressive foreign policy. Iran's attitude towards Saudi Arabia and the region is the reason why the Saudis won. If they felt secure from the Iranians, if they felt that Iran was a trade partner and not a security threat, they would not be interested in this. They would demand that concrete steps are taken by Israel to ameliorate the Palestinian situation and create a Palestinian state. The Chinese have done the same thing in the last 2 years by trying to attack India's border twice, in 2020 at Galwan and then subsequently at Arunachal Pradesh. They have also pushed India much closer to the United States, and now you have a very strong quad already established, which is out here to contain China. So I don't know who's advising these two countries, but their foreign policies seem to be counterproductive. Rather than increasing their security and increasing their influence in the region, they are scaring away potential partners and friends and potential allies and making them allies and friends of states with whom they have adversarial relationship. So I think in the end, the attempt by both China and Iran, at least on this particular issue, you could say may have backfired if this particular deal goes through. But if this deal doesn't go through, which means if Netanyahu, who in order to survive politically continues to say that I will never, never allow a Palestinian state, is it possible that the Saudis will further compromise, or maybe the Americans will further juice in the pot and say, okay, forget about Netanyahu, just normalize relations with Israel, no matter what Israel says, and we will give you whatever you want. We will sign a treaty. If you want, we will give you the state of Washington. You don't like the state of Washington, maybe we will give you California, Texas. We'll give you whatever you want. Just please recognize Israel. Maybe if the Americans do that, perhaps the Saudis will then abandon this silly demand that there should be some declaratory statements that Israel should make enough to provide some kind of political cover for the Saudis to normalize relations. But the key is the American part. I don't think Saudi Arabia will normalize relations with Israel just because Netanyahu says something. There will have to be a very tight treaty coming out of the US Senate. Well, I hope MBS is smart enough to make sure that he hires a lot of international lawyers to look at that treaty and not have a situation where somebody like Trump gets elected and then backs out of America's commitments. Americans have made commitments. I'm sorry to say my country has made commitments to people like the Kurds and then abandoned them, abandoned Afghanistan once again. And it looks that very soon we are going to abandon even the Ukrainians. So anyway, this is what is happening. And I thought I will shed some light on it. Very soon, I think we will see these developments come to a head because the election season in the US is going to start in earnest. And if there's any chances of a major treaty passing through the Senate, it'll have to happen in the next 3 or 4 months. I don't think it's going to happen in the fall. So I hope you found this discussion interesting. For those of you who watch the Middle East closely, please, if you have not subscribed to Khanversation until now, please subscribe to Khanversation, like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share it with your friends and your network. And it is quite possible that this might be the last Khanversation that I'm recording in India before. I may do another one, but I've been so busy with my family commitments. So the first part of my trip was series of lectures in Hyderabad and Delhi. And my second part of my trip is basically connecting with family. And so since I've come here after several years. So thank you very much for watching. I'm your host. I'm your friend, Muqtedar Khan.